much preaching is just unapplied orthodoxy. No, the application is a very important thing. Spurgeon, said that where the application begins, the sermon begins. And he said that the application should begin right at the beginning of the sermon. Don't wait to state your things and all, and then give the application. But let it go all the way through your sermon, and then let the application climax at the end. Now, I think the book of Romans does that very thing. Whether Spurgeon got that principle specifically from the book of Romans or not, I don't know. But it's exactly the order of the book of Romans, that there's application all the way through, and then application is brought to a climax at the end of the book. This whole thing of psychological victory, folks, it's built on the foundation of unapplied orthodoxy. And that's why so many people have been enamored of it. Because they thought that preacher's preaching never really got down into me where I live. Well, the Bible does. The Bible applies itself. And if we preach the Bible, we'll certainly believe that the application is all important. Then the second principle to keep in mind about these practical parts of the epistles is form general impressions about these chapters as a whole. Form general impressions about these chapters as a whole. Let me give you three general impressions of these chapters in Romans 12 to 16. The first is the starting point of true relationship. See, this passage tells about our relationships. For example, look down at the bottom of page 33, the Christian's different relationships. First, the Christian's foundational relationship. Then his relation to the church, his relation to society, his relation to human government, and his relation to his weaker brother. Now, what's the starting point? The starting point, of course, is the relation to God. And I can't be rightly related to any of these other things if I'm not rightly related to God. For example, just take one of them, number 4, the Christian's relation to human government. You say, well, a man can be patriotic if he hadn't presented his body a living sacrifice to the Lord. He can be patriotic as man uses the word, but not as God would use the word. You see how I know that to be true? It's because God has many things for me to do in relation to my country. Well, I can't find out what God's will is for me in relation to my country unless I have presented my body a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God. And what's true of me is true of everybody else. Nobody is truly patriotic if he hasn't surrendered his body to the Lord. Let me give you this little diagram by which I summarize these chapters 12 to 15 on the Christian's relationship. First, I just have the thickly shaded circle. The circle, a picture of God himself, because as you look at it, it's a picture of eternity. It doesn't begin and it doesn't end. Right in the middle of it, I just put the name God. God in the center of everything. And then one arrow over here to the church. If I am not rightly related to God, I am not rightly related to the church. Why is it so many people tear churches wide open and all? Because they aren't rightly related to God. Why is it some people have a great part in moving on with the church? They may differ from people on certain things, but they're unifying influence because they're rightly related to God. And I can't be rightly related to any church if I'm not rightly related to God. You see, I go around to different churches to preach. And I have this, that God's called me to be rightly related to each individual church to which I go. Well, one thing is I don't go there just to take over the pastor's ministry. I go there to be a help to him. And most of those who invite me to preach are those who come to the classes or who've heard me somewhere and all, and they know that generally we're moving in the same direction. But I I can't be rightly related to any individual church unless I'm rightly related to God. But if I'm rightly related to God, I'm rightly related to that individual church. Then the second is society. You say, well, that person fills his place in society. No, he doesn't, if he's not rightly related to God. Because you say that man can be a great statesman and yet not a Christian. Well, he may be a great statesman as men use the word, but he's not a great statesman in God's sight if he isn't rightly related to God himself. You know, one of the most famous of the presidents, who I know my pastor at home considered him to be a great Christian, was Woodrow Wilson. Well, I go back in 1916, not Taft, but Hughes, Supreme Court Justice, ran on the Republican ticket against Wilson. And of course, I was 6 years old then, and I knew how everybody ought to vote. And everybody called me Hughes, you know. And I was Hughes, not for Wilson. But my pastor thought Woodrow Wilson was a great Christian. But in the Versailles Treaty in Paris in 1918, and Woodrow Wilson was one of the main ones to draw up that treaty, there's not a mention of God in the whole treaty. Not a mention of God in the whole thing. So you say he was a great statesman as men use the word, and much better than a lot of Republican presidents. I believe that's true. Much better than a lot of Republican presidents, but you can't be rightly related to society if you aren't rightly related to God. And then over on this side is human government. A person may say, I keep the speed laws. I'm rightly related to human government. Well, certainly that's part of it, and it's a very bad thing that Christians are often put to shame by unsaved people. Lots of preachers are not as careful to keep the speed laws as unsaved people often are. And that's a disgrace. That is a disgrace. Nobody can be rightly related to the speed laws or anything else if he's not rightly related to God. You know, you often see this sign, yield. You know, you come out on a main thoroughfare, yield way. And I know what that means. And when I used to drive my car, I was very careful to yield because I didn't want to get my head knocked off. But often when I've seen that yield, I've just realized I can't really yield unless I yield. See, vertically to the Lord himself. Present your body as a living sacrifice. Nobody can be a true citizen if he doesn't present his body to the Lord, a living sacrifice. And then up here is one more era, the relation to the weaker brother. And if I don't have the right relation to my weaker brother, then it's because I haven't presented my body to the Lord as a living sacrifice. We're going to take these up, of course, in detail, one after the other. That's the first general impression I form about these chapters. The starting point of true relationship is the relation to God himself. Then the second is the great stress on the positive and on the negative. The great stress on the positive and on the negative. Every truth of God has strong positive applications and strong negative applications. Then the third is, remember that truth is unlimited, and the application of truth to life is unlimited. Applications of truth to life are unlimited. Truth is unlimited. The applications of truth to life are unlimited. You know, I love to preach sermons where there are a lot of applications to life. And sometimes I think, well, I'm just going to run out of those applications, particularly when I'm teaching my classes and all. And I don't hesitate to repeat some of these things from time to time. But I realize this, if I'm limited, it doesn't mean that truths are limited, because the applications of truth to life are unlimited. And that's why I like to keep my eyes and ears open all the time. Not generalities. Preaching in generalities will just kill a work for God. Generalities. Just Martin Lloyd-Jones warned so much about that. So much preaching, he says, is just a lot of generalities. My grandfather was quite critical of doctors and of preachers. And one of his criticisms of preachers was, just a lot of pious platitudes, son. Just a lot of pious platitudes. And I want the Lord to deliver me from that. And I want Him to deliver you from that. The relation of Romans 12:16 to Romans 1-11 we'll have after we have our break. Don't forget, teachers, come right on, please. Not just Romans, but since it's the first of the epistles, 21 epistles in our Bible, it applies all the way through. Remember that the application is very important. I want to emphasize that again because some commentaries on Romans spend a great deal of time in the first 11 chapters and then they just sort of clear their throats over the last 5 or 6 chapters. Don't do that. God gave, see, a big part of this is given to application. There's application all the way through. But then these last chapters bring it to a climax. And then the second suggestion is form general impressions about these chapters. Now, I gave you just 2 of these 3. The first is a starting point of true relationship, God Himself. And then the second is the completeness of true relationship. I think I omitted that. The completeness of true relationship. Those 5 relations at the bottom of page 33 include all the relationships of life. You could take those apart and you could get your numbering to be greater than that. But I put it under those 5 heads, as many others have put it under those 5 heads. And then the third general impression is the great stress on the positive and the negative. Then our third suggestion that I gave is remember that truth is unlimited and the applications of truth to life are unlimited. Let's ask the Lord now to lead our time. Father, we pray that in this Christ period, the Lord Jesus will see of the travail of His soul on Calvary, and that He will be satisfied. We pray in His precious name. Amen. The relation of Romans 12:16 to Romans 1-11 explain the meaning of the underscored words in Romans 12:1. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service. What is meant by that expression, the mercies of God? You notice the word is in the plural. That makes it even stronger, not just by the mercy of God. I'm here just not by the mercy of God, but I'm here by the mercies of God. What does that mean? Well, often people say it just means life and health and strength and food and clothing and shelter and friends and loved ones and things like that. All those things are included. I think some overstate it and say it doesn't have any relation to those at all. Yes, it does. Those things are included. Romans 8:32 says, He that spared not His own Son, but delivered Him up for us all, how shall He not with His Son freely give us all things? It includes it. But that isn't the main thing he's talking about. Those words, the mercies of God, just summarize the first 11 chapters of Romans. The mercies of God in individual redemption, chapters 1-8. The mercies of God in world redemption, chapters 9-11. Over those first 11 chapters, you can just write the mercies of God. You know that song we often sing, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Now, when you give that out in a meeting and all, you might ask people now, you're counting your blessings. All right, will you name some of those blessings? And some of them may mention salvation, just one aspect of salvation. But most of them would just leave out what God really emphasized in the mercies of God. Count your many blessings. I think I told you that Dr. Chafer wrote several volumes of theology. He's much more dispensational than I am personally in my understanding of the Bible, but he has a lot of very rich things. And in his book, his volume called Soteriology, which is the doctrine of salvation, he mentions how many things happened to you when you were saved. And he listed 33 things. You'll find them listed in that volume on soteriology. 33 things that happened to you when you're saved. Well, you know, our natural tendency is just grouping together. Thank you, I'm saved, Lord. Somebody gives his testimony and says, I thank the Lord I'm saved. Thank the Lord I'm saved. And somebody else, same old thing. Tweedledum, tweedledee. Sometimes we change a little bit and tweedledee, tweedledum, back and forth. Rather than taking it apart. That's the real blessing. But usually when people sing that song, Count Your Many Blessings, that isn't what they mean. What they mean is food, clothing, shelter, and things like that. And they're included, but they aren't the main ones. Do any of you have Dr. Chafer's volumes on theology? I'm almost sure it's Soteriology, the Doctrine of Salvation. You'll find those listed. He said he was up in Maine one summer and somebody let him have a cottage. And he says the cottage was wonderful, but it rained the whole time he was up there, and he had to stay in the cottage. And he said one thing he did was just to trace all the things that happened to him when the Lord saved him. All the things that happened to you and me when the Lord saved us. That's the expression, the mercies of God, summarizes the first 11 chapters of Romans. Individual redemption, chapters 1 to 8, and world redemption, chapters 9 to 11. Mention discuss any basic relations you find between the first 11 chapters and the last 5 chapters. Let me mention 2. The first is expressed by the preacher who said, 2 parts to the gospel, believing the gospel and behaving the gospel. We see that's chapters 1 to 11, believing the gospel. In chapters 12 to 16, behaving the gospel. If I believe the gospel, I'll behave the gospel. And if I don't behave the gospel, then I won't believe the gospel. Chapter 12, verse 2 says, be not conformed to this world. That's a big command. Oh, I tell you, it includes a lot. Be not conformed to this world. But what's my hope for that? Go back in your mind to chapter 8, verse 29. He also did foreordain to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. See, that's my hope in obeying chapter 12, verse 2. Naturally, I'm conformed to this world. Naturally, I'm just conformed to everything about the world. I think I've told you what Miss Ruth Paxson said, that the average Christian, she didn't say church member, the average Christian is under satanic control 90% of the time. Now, I don't give that as authoritative. I quote that, but I don't try to reject it because I'm afraid it's mighty close to the truth. That the average Christian is under satanic control 90% of the time. If you want to discuss that with me or argue, that's fine. I won't argue back because I'm not sure it's that true. But I tell you, folks, it surely does seem to be true in a great many cases. And I tell you, naturally, I'm conformed to this world. I'm conformed to this world. The average person in the world thinks the real difference between him and a Christian is that the Christian goes to church and he doesn't. That's what a lot of people in the world think, because they don't see much difference. I heard one man who was saying to another one time, are you a Christian? And the man said, no, are you? I said, yes. He said, well, I'm surprised. The Christian said, I don't see any difference between the way you live and the way I live. See, those things are heart-rending. They go right home to your soul. But be not conformed to this world. No, but we know that all things work together for good. Romans 8, 28 to 30. That we may be conformed to the image of God's Son. that he may be the firstborn among many brethren. Then the second is what God expects is great in proportion to what he's done for us. What God expects of us is great in proportion to what he's done for us. You take the book of Ephesians is built around that. First 3 chapters, what God has done for us. Then chapters 4 to 6, what he does in us and through us, what we're to do for him. And I used to think, well, the last 3 chapters are convicting, what I'm to do for God. The first 3 chapters aren't convicting. Oh, I want to tell you, the first 3 chapters of Ephesians are 3 of the most convicting chapters in the Bible, because what God expects of us is in terms of what he's done for us. I copied this statement, one writer describing the mercies of God, and he used these wonderful words. He said, it would be as easy to count the grains of sand on the seashore or the drops of water in the ocean as to count the mercies of God. My, you say that's precious. Yeah, that's convicting too. Because you see, that's how much God expects of me. That's how much God expects of you in terms of what he's done for us. If anybody wants to write that, I consider that just a tremendous quotation. It goes home to my soul. It would be as easy to count the grains of sand on the seashore or the drops of water in the ocean as to count the mercies of God. But most of us wouldn't be like that. The idea is, oh, I can just name the things God has done for me and all. I thank the Lord I'm saved, and he puts salvation just in one big lump and doesn't take it apart or anything. But Romans takes it apart. Ephesians takes it apart, and the epistles of Paul in general take our salvation apart. By the number 3 at the bottom of page 33, the Christian's different relationships, would you print in capital letters the word responsible? You're responsible for this. We just have this simple section outlined by these 5 relationships. And don't forget the foundational relationships, the relation to God. And I gave that in terms of the diagram up here. That's what we're going to study now as we come towards the close of Romans. On page 34, the Christian's foundational relationship, Romans 12, 1 and 2. In answering this, you'll probably have to write some of this on the back of your page. I want to give several suggestions about how to study this wonderful passage, Romans 12, 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. I read one time of a Christian who liked to write key words in the margin of his Bible. And by Romans 12, 1 and 2, the acceptable will of God, he just wrote acceptable and accepted. Acceptable and accepted. By the way, I read the other day of this Christian who wrote alongside many verses in the Bible, T and P. T and P. You know what the Christian man? Tried and proven. Tried and proven. And that's what I want to be able, I mean in truthfulness, to say for all these great things. I'm going to give 6 suggestions about how to study Romans 12, 1 and 2. Now on your exam, I don't expect you to remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 like this. Here, I expect you to remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the general outline of these chapters. But I just state them in 1, 2, 3 fashion. The first suggestion about studying Romans 12, 1 and 2 is stress the Bible emphasis upon the body. Stress the Bible emphasis upon the body. Now, I'm going to give this as a suggestion and request, and not as an assignment to you students. But the suggestion and request is, take your concordance. How many of you in the school and out of the school have a concordance? Take a concordance and trace through the Bible the word body, and then trace through the Bible the different parts of the body. One of the simplest ways to present surrender to everybody, and especially to children, is in terms of the body. I just like to point and say, have you given him this? Have you given him your mind? Have you given him your eyes, your ears, your mouth, your hands, your feet? Give him every part of your body. Take those different parts of the body and trace them. Mouth and lips, of course, would be kindred words. Eyes, mind, ears, hands, feet, and you'll find an awful lot of the Bible is built around this. The body. Stress the Bible emphasis upon the body. A great deal the Bible says about the soul is in terms of the body. And the soul expresses itself through the body. If my body is not surrendered, then my soul is not surrendered. One writer, R.G. Lee, made this statement. Now this is not the R.G. Lee, the well-known Baptist preacher. I think he went to be with the Lord, and he's 93 years old, I think, several years ago. But this is R.G. Lee from Mildmay Conference over in England. I have quite a few of his outline studies of the Bible. And any of you have any of his outline studies? He has some very good things, R.G. Lee. And he says one of the surprises of the Bible, he says this in his dealing with the book of Leviticus, one of the surprises of the Bible is its insistence on the holiness of the body as well as that of the soul. I've got a mark on that in my notes. One of the surprises of the Bible is its insistence on the holiness of the body as well as that of the soul. I think he's a very good writer. I've gotten a lot of good things from him. But I don't agree with him on that. I believe it's much more accurate to say it would be a great surprise if there were no emphasis upon the holiness of the body, because the body is the vehicle of the soul. Many years ago, Dr. McQuilkin wrote his booklet entitled Our Young People's Purity Problem. And he was amazed how many people, some of whom were considered to be very earnest Christians, took him to task on that. The idea was that's too strict for young people. That's too strict for young people. And of course in it he just laid great stress on the holiness of the body, and he didn't pull his punches. I noticed how he handled this up at the Ben Lippen Conference for young people. We'd be going along. We started usually, I think it was on Saturday night. And we'd be going along until about Tuesday or Wednesday night. And he'd have other speakers speak. And then he took over on Wednesday night. And young people would be giving testimonies and how real they were. God is the one who knows. Some of them sounded awfully frivolous. But boy, they didn't give as many frivolous testimonies after that, because he hit hard on petting and necking and holding hands and all that sort of thing. And some folks, oh, that's too strict. That's too strict for young people. If a young person asked me, what's wrong with kissing and necking and petting? You know how I'd answer it? I'd say, I'll answer it for you, but I won't answer it until you give your body completely to the Lord. And only when you give your body completely to the Lord will you be ready for my answer. You see, the idea is, oh, I'm going to give him my opinion and all. My opinion, he'd just take it as my opinion. But he won't take it as my opinion if he gives his body to the Lord. Because if he gives his body to the Lord, he's not going to lead a lot of arguments about something like this. Young folks, in your dating and all, you won't rise any higher in your Christian life than you do in your dating. You won't rise any higher in your Christian life than you do in your dating. And you take all sorts of liberties with one another, liberties that belong only to the intimacy of the marriage relationship. And I tell you, that is unholiness of the body. And right at the beginning of all these relationships, God stresses the holiness of the body. A Bible college student, I've got his name down here, and I see no reason to give it. I don't think you'd know who it was, but I don't want to give it anyway because I put it here just to remind me of what he said. Years ago, I was at Bible college. He said that before he came to school, he knew something was wrong with his Christian life, but he didn't know what it was. And he said God spoke to him about it at CBC. Said his girlfriend and he had taken all sorts of liberties with one another. Taken all sorts of liberties with one another. And he just said that was the main thing that was keeping me from going forward in the Lord. I tell you, it's true of many young people. Well, some preachers even joke with young folks about petting and necking and kissing and all that kind of thing. I don't joke about it because the Bible emphasizes the holiness of the body.